Hello, everybody. So this is a joint conversation between the static site editor and marketing website teams to discuss the monorepo refactor that will ultimately lead to the handbook and marketing sites being their own independent sites in the GitLab con repo. We've got some decisions to make and refactoring to do with regards to shared assets between the two sites and how we deal with that. And this conversation is to recap the situation and then discuss the approach that we want to take going forward. Chad, can you start off by giving us just a quick intro as to what the status of the monorepo refactor is and the challenge ahead of us?
Sure. Hello, everybody. So I'll paste in whoops, the epic, which we still need to reorganize things, but that will contain most of it. And the topics today are going to be primarily what we still need to reorganize these, but primarily what we're calling phase one. And then I wanted to also talk a little bit about this issue, which has a lot of tasks in it that I'm going to be working on. Could probably be split up into an epic. We may or may not do that. But the big picture is that we've known for a while that we need to split up everything into uh, different areas of ownership because we're going to be going different directions with the handbook versus the various parts of the marketing site, the blog, and everything else. That's become even more clear and urgent lately. We know marketing wants to go with the CMS, and the handbook is going to do its things. And the monorepo approach is a good one, and we've covered that elsewhere. And so I've gone ahead and moved all of the handbook down into its monorepo site, which was fairly easy because it wasn't too coupled to everything else. But the original plan was to split out just the blog only and several other areas into their own sites and do those iteratively. But because of a combination of the way middleman works and the very intertwined nature of pages showing different parts of the site, it turned out that after several attempts that wasn't possible. So we're just going to move everything combined out to its own site. But that is still a challenging thing to do because there is still a lot shared between the handbook and the rest of the site, which we're calling marketing. And the two things that I pasted, that issue is really the low-hanging fruit that we can clean up as a preliminary step. And the main crux of that is to get everything separated to that is currently at top level. And you can look at the description of it for a lot more detail, but that's the crux of it. And that will make everything else a lot easier going forward. So those should really, and then the rest of the phase one, which is the main purpose of this discussion, is sort of talking about these difficult discussions. And that is that note that I pasted in. Do you have a link to that note, quick, John, that you could paste in? Will I continue to talk?
Note is that?
The brain dump, the note that's at the bottom of that epic.
Okay, I'll get you continue talking. I'll get it in.
And the crux of that is what do we? That was a lot of technical detail about this decision of sharing stuff that I dumped on there. And Jean and I have been discussing this between ourselves, and I really just needed to get it out of my head all of the difficult technical questions and get a larger audience for it, for the decision, and also to just be aware of the decisions we're going to have to make. And for that one, the main trade-offs are we either duplicate a bunch of stuff, which is still really used and shared because it's all one site, and there's definitely downsides to that, like we change keys or third-party services, or there's actual layouts that we want to look the same, like that is something marketing-ish, or some marketing copy that we show both on the marketing side and a handbook. If we duplicate that, it's going to get evolve out of sync, or there's a key, an AdWords key or something along those lines that we duplicate. It only gets changed in one place and not the other, and then it breaks, or something like that. But the other trade-off is, well, if we don't duplicate it, you sort of have to tease apart these parts that are actually shared and refactor them and try to leave as little as possible shared at the top, which is a very time-consuming and difficult thing to do. It's not nearly as quick and easy as just duplicating everything. And then in some cases, like we just really definitely shouldn't duplicate them. So that was sort of what that brain dump was about. And apologies, it's really hard to distill this into any sort of cohesive and simple point because there's so much to it. But I guess the crux of this meeting, what I wanted to get to is on that issue with the preliminary stuff, just do a quick walkthrough on that, make sure everybody is okay with the direction I'm going on that with the build, because it's going to pretty drastically change the build. And then B, talk through these at least at a high level, and maybe a placeholder for another meeting of what we want to do about the split up and what our general opinions and stances are on the various risks and trade-offs there. Was that good enough as a recap for 8 minutes in?
Sounds good.
Yeah. I want to get to point 2, which is kind of like what seems like the most, and I'm making the assumption that everybody's had a chance to at least scan the stuff. But I think for me, there's going to be, for me, the obvious solution here is the middle ground one, where we have some things that we can duplicate because it's low risk and it's likely going to change either on the marketing or the handbook side in the near term. And then if I'm talking near term, I'm probably talking next 1 to 3 months. Then there's things that will continue to be shared, likely, potentially even with the new marketing website. I'm thinking like things that, like compliance things, like CookieBot, like whether we, whatever solution we use on the website, we're going to need a similar solution for the handbook, and it doesn't make sense to have separate things on there. So I think there's going to be this scenario where there's certain things we're going to want to keep sharing for a long, let's call it medium term and longer term, and in the short term, there's things that are lower risk and that we're happy to duplicate and let it deviate in its own kind of like course of action. So I want to potentially make a short circuit, unless anybody disagrees, and say, let's discuss the middle road option and see what it is we need to do further on that, unless anybody has a strong opinion around a different route that is preferred.
And just to jump in, that's sort of the point I made in that note. Like, that's definitely what we're going to do, some combination of the two, but that's also not the easiest way forward, and it's still a lot of individual calls to be made on what is important and what's not, what should be shared and what should be duplicated. And I'm definitely not the person to make that call in every case. So it's just there's a lot of minor decisions implied by taking that middle ground.
So I think one of the things we need to do is establish some sort of I guess, just agreement in terms of how we make these calls. How do we determine and so on. I think the obvious kind of like choice would be, for instance, initially for Michael and myself to make those calls. But I am cognizant that Michael is going on parental leave soon, so we're probably going to need you to delegate your decision-making powers to one of your team to stand in for you during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like first obviously comes to mind, Lauren, you're so in this work that you are the natural choice, and then you could have Brandon as your, counsel, or if you need the second opinion. Everyone on this call seems like the right party.
All right. So I think then what I would also suggest is that we, there's precedent for setting up project channels in Slack. And I'm going to suggest we create like a project monorepo refactor channel just for quick conversations and bringing things to each other's attention. And it's an easy way to ensure that everybody gets informed about the issues and comments or whatever. And we can, like when there's a decision to be made, we can Slack it in there and quickly get a call on it with, I don't think we need to go too formal or anything, and we can always document the decision and issue comments and stuff. So I'm going to recommend that I'll take the action to create the Slack channel first to just help with communication.
And maybe it's
so
like we could have a loose agreement around like time. If we're putting out something that needs an answer, like we can sort this out in that Slack channel or in a later conversation. But I always just get worried about bottlenecks, or there sometimes just a decision is better than indecision. So, which is a line from Sopranos randomly. But it's better to keep moving forward, especially with something so complicated. And I can only imagine, Chad, if like something gets missed, you're just kind of sitting there spinning your wheels. So if we have a loose kind of working agreement that, I asked the question, I didn't hear from it, like an answer from a day and a half, my intuition says this way, I went this way. I think keeping our velocity up with this is pretty important. I know this is a huge unlock for just so much of the work that's coming up. So I'd be happier to see us make progress as a group than like progress as consensus.
And that's definitely how I've been tending to work. It's where I'm really hesitant to do that is where I believe the right decision would be to change the content. It's like, now we really don't need to show the list of releases on this random page over here about welcome to GitLab. Let's just put a link there. Like that would be the sort of thing I'd like to say, okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Get a backup on that.
Cool.
Yeah, I think wherever we deviate from what the public audience sees right now, when it changes functionality or content, that's when we need to. I think when it comes to the technical aspects, a common sense approach with a bias towards transparency, keeping each other in the loop is probably the preferred mode of operation without having to ask for permission. So rather forgiveness than permission in that sense. But when it comes to anything that impacts existing feature set or content or might impact SEO or anything like that, we definitely just need to get a call made on that.
Yeah, that's clear.
So that brings to mind for me an action item that we could have. So to clarify, what you're proposing going to a CMS is the blog portion of the site, not necessarily releases or releases too.
So what was the second part of that?
We haven't really considered the releases, and honestly, I don't really understand how that would work in a CMS because it's so tightly coupled with the product.
Okay.
I was just going to say it's a very automated process that product has put together for themselves over time, and they've spent a lot of effort in it. So I wouldn't necessarily move that to the CMS. It may share certain things like styles or whatever, depending on if they ask us to update it. But I imagine that is kind of, even though it's currently built using blog technology, like it might become its own thing as well.
So that,
as far as I understand, just sorry to try to interrupt, they're working towards building a feature in GitLab, the product, to handle release posts and stuff. So how it kind of like ends up on the website, I don't know yet, but from a data management and input point of view, they're looking to build that into the product and, for instance, read that data from issues and so on. I think the challenge right now, and I think what Chad's alluding to, is that based on the way that the blog and the releases are configured and how it's presented to the end user, it's really intertwined, and it's not two separate clear-cut entities.
so what I was going to say is that knowing that you have decided that you're going to make just the blog into a CMS, that gives a really clear action item and task that y'all, Lauren and Brandon and your team, can take away from this, which is basically every place that will be working towards stuff you're going to have to do anyway, which is every place that, and it's easy to find these and I can help you find them, but every call to like blog dot whatever in a template, and you can also see this by doing a build and seeing it break, you have to find those and get rid of them, and isolate them only to under the blog path, and everywhere else do something different, whether it's an iframe or just linking to the page or something like that. So we can, as an action item coming out of this meeting, definitely say that's a part of this that y'all can tackle and start helping with whenever you're ready, because you definitely have to do it for the CMS move.
Yeah, and I think just to be clear, I'm not 100% super clear on this, but the way I'm holding it is that blog will be CMS, as will the about dot pages. So whether that's the same CMS or it's broken into two for build purposes, totally open, but just want to make sure, I don't even know which order we're going to go after them yet, but that probably would make sense to phase it. But both of those will be able to be like edited through the CMS.
I'm sure Lauren and Brandon know what I mean by this, but just to be explicit, it's like that's middleman trying to call the blog extension from somewhere else. Once it's not via middleman anymore, it's not going to work. And that's really the crux of a lot of these things that have made us have to pull the whole thing down, and I've run into problems before, at least the first ones. There'll be more along those lines.
Can we keep release posts and the blog posts separate and run two different blogs within the site?
That's definitely the direction, and that's what that preliminary issue work is working towards. Like, the two blog things are going to be their own build with middleman, just like they are now. The release post is going to be its own thing with middleman, just like it is now, but they're going to be separate deploys. They'll still be coupled in that other things use those, but that will let you break those couplings by putting links to the page or iframes or whatever you want to do, and then switch those deploys to be whatever you want with your new CMS without impacting anything else. And that's sort of the crux of this first step of work that I'm going to tackle right now as part of that issue, to enable y'all to do that. I hope that makes sense, but we can definitely explain it in more technical detail later.
Works for me. And thank you. Sounds great.
Chada, what else do you need from this conversation to unblock you on this topic?
Well, so the issue is definitely unblocked. Can we have an action item that Lauren and Brandon review that issue and make sure that they understand and are on board with everything that's going to happen in it? That's
you're talking about the low-hanging fruit cleanup. Yeah,
this 8203. Would y'all be okay with that, Brandon and Lauren?
Yeah, I can take a look. I think I remember going over this and seeing a lot of stuff that made sense to me. Like if I read something that didn't make sense, I would call it out more than, yeah.
Sure. And it's mainly just to make sure you're there's nothing in there that because I'm planning on cranking through that as fast as I can over the next week or so, without very many reviews. So if there's anything in there that's like, no, that's a bad idea, don't do that, you should let me know. One thing at the bottom of that list, which we can even make another point here. I don't know, I'm just going to insert it. What about the review app? And we discussed with Sean, we can make it to avoid bloating this meeting a placeholder for another discussion, but I think we should bring it up now. Do you agree?
The review app was staging.
Sorry, I'm so bad with words sometimes. Staging. The other
Yeah,
thing.
so I wanted to know, do you all use the staging environment at all in the work you do on the website and the blog?
Yeah, it's used for redirects. It's the
apart
primary
from the
reason
redirects?
to test the redirect loops. Yeah.
That's the only use I'm aware of. The only thing I can think of moving forward is we may, when we're building out a CMS, need something similar, but we can evaluate at the time. You know, I don't know that it needs to be that stage. It wouldn't be that staging environment. I don't think it would be like some other environment. But yeah, the only other use I'm aware of is the redirects, like Lauren said. There may be others, but that's the only one I'm aware of, and I've been here almost a year now and haven't seen any others.
So one of the 2 times that I tried to do a redirect, and it was when Sid was waiting on it, and it was an emergency, it actually didn't work. It worked on the staging site and did not work when I deployed it to prod. So there's, I don't think they're configured the same. And is it used that often, or can you just say, you know, you test them on prod, and if they're not right, you try to get them right again? Like, is it providing that much value? Because to do it right, we should really step back, look at production, however it's built, whether it's by Terraform or Ansible, most likely just a bunch of bespoke crafted stuff, and get that automated, and then make staging be exactly the same way, because it doesn't work the same way now.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, at least from my perspective. I've kind of wondered since I got here, because my previous company, we would always run into issues where, you know, the test environment was never configured exactly the same as production. So like it's good to have that parity for sure. And yeah, I don't know how it, like you said, it's configured right now.
Because it is going to add extra work and complexity to the cleanup that I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is make the deploy step just go away. So the review app will definitely go away, but all that will be left and making things more complex and take more time is staging. So if nobody would really complain about it, I'd like to err on the side of like, let's just get rid of it and say redirects are tested on staging, and you maybe need to take a couple of tries at them. What are your thoughts on that, Lauren?
I know the SEO wouldn't be happy with getting rid of testing the redirects, because they use that extensively. I think on like a weekly basis. So they'd want to keep testing redirects on the staging environment.
Okay, if that's the case, then I think the action item needs to be, we figure out a way that runs like as part of the actual MR, and only if the redirects are changed, possibly.
Okay. Yeah, because right now it's just a manual job. So yeah, it'd be great if it automatically ran anytime that file's changed.
That may run into like security issues or something, but I can't see why. Yeah, let's.
And that redirects it, because it's run through Fastly. It'd be cool if you could somehow get it to work with review apps and then just get rid of staging altogether. But there's some hand waving to make that happen in the back.
Right. Ideally, I'd like to just punt on it and get it out of the main build. Maybe just leave it in the review app.
I just want to be the timekeeper here. We've got a couple of minutes left. Lauren, do you want to quickly verbalize point 4?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's an issue or epic created for moving the marketing site into its own subsite. Since we've done the blog, but we need to put it all together. And I would love to work with Chad on doing that, just so I can really understand all the code that went into the monorepo and really dive in.
So my assumption, and Chad, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was that the blog would essentially just become marketing right now and contain everything that's not handbook. So we wouldn't create a third site at this point. It would all just be two sites essentially. We do need to clean up some of these issues and epics, but things have changed quite rapidly over the last while, and they're not all reflecting the reality of what we're planning. So we do need to clean up, and I think in terms of you being involved in the process, I'm definitely for that. I obviously have a key man dependency on Chad at this stage, so if a bus hits him, like it's not great. And so having a second pair of eyes following him along would be great. And I'll leave that up to the two of you to figure out how best to work on this together. Whether it's through reviews or pairing or whatever.
Yeah, at a high level, we were trying to split it along this separation and then isolation route, and the separation would be like pulling down all the sites individually and then doing independent deploys and pipelines and stuff. And it turns out you just really can't approach it that way. So the step back and reapproach of it is this new phased approach, which we haven't reflected in the epics yet because we just talked about it in the middle of last week. And the crux of the beginning of that is what lives in that issue, the 8302. And one of the main points of that, in addition to splitting up into separate builds, is at the end of that, we'll be able to just delete all of the blog symlinks, and it'll no longer be a monorepo site. It'll just have the content living there in the directory. And then what I'm envisioning is that whole site that's now called blog just gets renamed to marketing, and then everything else moved down under it. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
I think what we should do is, Chad, we should update the epic that Lawrence linked here, the 6541, to reflect what we just discussed. I'll write down an action for this.
Yeah, that is.
Okay. Lauren, do you want to verbalize point 5?
Yeah. I was wondering if we could take all the stuff that creates our GitLab theme and put it in as a subsite in our monorepo. So we could work on updating the CSS and JavaScript independently of the other sites and kind of isolate all of that into its own sub-project.
So some of that is covered in that issue 8302. The first, what I'm planning on doing as part of that is decoupling the building of the JavaScript and assets to a separate job in CI. And then these two sites that we initially end up with, handbook and marketing, we'll just leverage that on their own and be able to run that job themselves. So the files will still live at the top level, but how we build them, we may use Webpack, you may use Gulp, could be a different approach. And to sort of kick the can down the road on how we split those up until we actually get the move of the content and templates done first. But for now, they're still in the same place, but they're just built differently, however you want to do it.
I would think that there's going to be a lot of shared front-end assets between the handbook and marketing. And some changes won't necessarily need style sheets built.
Yeah, That's not even the immediate part of this decision,
Yeah.
which is how do we unentangle the actual pages. Unentangling all the JavaScript and the tools and the libraries is, as I said, yet more big decisions of that size or bigger. And I was just
Okay.
deferring those because those aren't immediate blockers to actually moving the files down.
Okay. Got it.
This is going to be a marathon. And hopefully not like the original one where the guy dies at the end.
Brandon, you've got 0.6.
Yeah, so just kind of at the bottom of that refactor separation decoupling issue, it says remove review and deploy jobs. And I know there's a lot of stuff gone over above that, but I'm just kind of wondering what exactly that entails. Like why are they no longer needed at that point? Like I'm just kind of not getting that part of the flow, I guess.
Sure. The crux of it is like every part of the site you build, whether it's like everything under handbook or everything under blog, which you do via CMS, or everything else, everything under releases, everything else that's not under those are going to be independent jobs in CI. And now the way it works, all of those independent jobs build their stuff. They pass it along to the artifacts to this deploy job. It sucks it all down, which is really slow because it's a ton of data to ship around, and then deploys it all at once. The new approach, which is in this issue, is each of those jobs, when they're done building it, they're just going to deploy that part. And the crux of that is instead of the main deploy, like deleting everything that doesn't need to be there, that's sort of going to get moved out to this scheduled job that does it, cleans up old files out of band. And each part of the site that you build will also just incrementally deploy that. And so that approach also is intended to let us use different technologies to deploy it. If you want to change to whatever CMS, as long as you end up with the same files you want under blog on that GCP bucket, you can change it however you want. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So there's still kind of reviews and deploy phases. They're just done really differently, and they kind of all sync to the same sort of spot.
That was the point of me asking about staging. Especially if staging goes away, no, there wouldn't be a deploy phase or review phase. Like it would all be in the job. And so that stage would be like build and deploy. Each job is going to build and deploy the part of the site that it needs. And then that lets you move those around like Legos. You can move them to a different site. You can make them build something differently. You can make them deploy differently, as long as the end result of that is those files end up in the bucket in the right place.
So I'm just trying to figure out, in terms of the interface, from a marketing user's perspective, right now they click on the review button and it pulls up an app. And when that's approved, it gets deployed live. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of, more so than the jobs or how it's achieved. Like,
yeah,
those
that'll still work the same way.
Okay.
It's just where that deploy is happening is going to be earlier and faster and less coupled to everything else.
Sounds good.
And this also lets us, in some cases, not all of them, but for example, like in the images, we can say, if none of the images change, we don't need to build them, which is one of the slowest ones. For other things, as long as everything is still using middleman, it's more like, I don't know, you still have to build it if anything changed because you don't know what you could have been sharing.
Cool, thanks.
All right. Any further points before I wrap up?
Are we still aiming to have parent-child pipelines?
I've been trying to follow those issues, and I'm not 100% sure, but the blocker before was you can't pass artifacts up from a child pipeline to a parent pipeline and use them. But one of the main, and we're still going to need to have artifacts for the job that like deletes all of the old files. Like that's still going to be in the review and deploy phase, because it has to say, okay, everything that got built, what's not on the bucket anymore. And we still have to have that. Back to your question, Brian, that's the only thing that's going to be left in the deploy phase that I've seen. But for normal deploys, no. So given that, until they have the artifacts working right, which I don't think they still do, we can't have parent-child pipelines. Maybe we can, and maybe we don't need to use them, or maybe that all lives in the parent pipeline. I haven't looked into it closely enough.
Yeah, seeming like we're going to have one big pipeline, which is fine for clarifying.
Yep.
All right, recapping. So we've decided our decision-making process. When it comes to technical implementation matters, we'll take a bias to action and implement as best determined, but share changes made with the broader group so that everybody stays informed. If anything impacts functionality, content, or SEO, it needs.
Yeah. Oh, you had content later.
It needs a decision made before proceeding. I'll make decisions from a handbook point of view. Michael will make decisions from a marketing point of view, delegating to Lauren in his absence. And then action items as I've identified, I will tag each one of you who's identified in there so you get an email notification in your inbox for these. All right. Anything else before we sign off? Have a good day, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for the visibility, everyone. This is great.
Thanks.
Awesome. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.